You can't fake being a good teacher. At one moment or another, your true colors are going to be exposed. Teachers at any age can have a strong impact on your life. I had one teacher in high school who casually talked about how she smoked pot when she was younger and expressed that it wasn't a big deal and she didn't really care if her students took part. Regardless of your beliefs on legalization, it is illegal, and it was illegal everywhere in the early 2000s. She also informed the class that she had tenure and she was retiring soon, so she could say and do whatever she wanted. In the same high school, I had a teacher named Mr. Poland. Mr. Poland was a history teacher turned Japanese teacher. He took over for the previous Japanese teacher who had moved on to a different high school, and now he had taken over the Japanese job on top of his history schedule. He had previously lived in Japan, so he did have a background, and he was a great teacher. He had come up with a curriculum. He had to come up with a curriculum in the Japanese role for the first time and still manage his social science classes. And he had to try and figure out where the last teacher had left off. It had to be stressful, right? Well, despite the trials and the aggravation and everything being thrown on this man all at one time, he made a point to take time out of his personal life outside of the classroom to speak to my scout troop about Japanese culture before we took a trip to the Japanese restaurant Sushi 2 in Shadyside. He did it not just once, but he did it twice. Welcome to the River's Edge Radio Network. I am Brian Crawford. I am the master of the Millville Shore, and I will be gracing you with my presence this evening at 8 p.m. at the Double L Bar. And it's going to be a good time. You can hit us up at 412-407-2PGH. That's 412-407-2744, or on Twitter at RiverTalkPGH. You're listening to riversedgepgh.com, powered by NJL WebTech. Honest, practical, and affordable. You can go to njlwebtech.com for all of your web servicing needs. Tonight I battle Ian Insect at the Double L for Pod Crawl, and the Swive will sit down. We're going to talk today about education in the region and the decisions that are made that can affect students' lives. I believe Professor Tom Wendt of Duquesne University is a Mr. Poland type teacher, taking time out of his life to enrich the students of those who he teaches. Who is Tom Wendt? Well, why do I say that he is a Mr. Poland-like teacher? Well, let's ask him. He's right there. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a true pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about this event you have, Collegiate Tuesdays,
Sure,
at James Street, the James Street Gastropub and Speakeasy, which is a favorite venue of mine on the north side. And you're taking time out of your day. This is not part of what you do with Duquesne. I mean, it's related to what you do with Duquesne University, but it's not what you're getting paid for, correct? This is something you're doing outside of that.
This is kind of a bit of an experiment that we're trying. I'm a new adjunct professor at Duquesne in the jazz department and in the percussion department, and we sort of had the idea of trying to get the students out on some sort of regular basis to participate in a jam session for them, where they could come out and play with a professional rhythm section and just get the experience of playing in front of a real audience. That's a big part of learning how to play jazz music is the tradition is passed down orally and in that sort of more casual setting, and you learn from being around the older musicians and having a chance to play with them and talk with them and just sort of being in that environment where you can freely ask them questions and watch them play and learn. It's a very important thing, and we were trying to get them out on a regular basis to experience that. So we're going to be at James Street the first Tuesday of each month from 8:30 to 11:30 p.m. And the house band will be made up of mostly the professors from the Duquesne Jazz Department, myself, Jeff Bush, who's a wonderful trombonist, Mr. Mike Tamero, who's the head of the jazz department at Duquesne, wonderful saxophonist, bassist Paul Thompson, who is an artist in residence at Duquesne this year, and various pianists and guitarists will be joining us as well. So that's kind of the overall plan right now.
Yeah, I know a band that's one of my favorite bands in Pittsburgh, Elevations. They often
Yes.
credit the work that they've been exposed to by some of the famous jazz musicians in this area. I know Roger Humphreys has been a
Yes.
huge influence on them,
Absolutely.
so I definitely could see where that could take a group because
Absolutely.
they've definitely are doing wonderful things,
Yes.
and it's exciting to see. So, did you come up with this idea, or how did this idea come to fruition?
Well, it was it was a combination of myself and my colleague Jeff Bush, who I mentioned earlier. About a year or so ago, we were thinking about how can we create this environment for the students outside of the the university setting where they can come and learn in this fashion, and we had thought about doing a weekly jam session somewhere, but it was it's not easy to get regular gigs as it used to be. But thankfully, Kevin at James Street offered us the first Tuesday of each month, and we thought, once a month is probably just the right amount of time in between. So it was kind of Jeff Bush and I, but Mike Tamaro, who's the director there, also gave us his blessing and some input as well for doing it. So we're very grateful that the university is behind us, on this. So that's always a good thing.
Do you have to be a Duquesne student to go to this?
Not at all. I mean, this is sort of happening through Duquesne for the Duquesne students, but we've invited students from Carnegie Mellon, from Slippery Rock, from the University of Pittsburgh, as far away as West Virginia Wesleyan College, all the way down in Buchanan, West Virginia. So we're trying to make this something that all college students from the area are welcome to come. It's not just for Duquesne students.
Now, you mentioned that it's an important part of jazz culture to kind of learn from some of these people who are more established in the field. Did you experience that, and who did you learn from as you were maturing as a musician yourself?
Yeah, I totally did. I was really fortunate because I think my generation was one of the last generations to come up where there were, each week here in Pittsburgh, there were multiple jam sessions that were each run by older established players that you could go to, and you could listen, you could learn, and if you were lucky enough you would be invited to play, and it was just a tremendous learning experience. Roger Humphreys is my main mentor and teacher, and he has always had a weekly jam session somewhere in the city where younger players could go. But like I said, back in the early mid 90s when I was in high school, that's there were multiple events like this each week that you could go and learn from. So yeah, I was really fortunate to be able to come up in that sort of environment, and it's a beautiful way to learn because it's casual, it's not quite so formal, but you really get to know these musicians, not just as musicians but as people, and you sort of see how everything is done. There's a certain jam session etiquette. You don't just walk in and just play whenever you want. There's a certain etiquette that's followed, and by learning that, you learn more than just how to play an instrument. You learn how to interact with other musicians. I always tell my students one of the biggest things about going to a jam session is that you also go to listen to other musicians. You don't just go to sit in and play. You go to listen to all the other players and see how they play and how they interact with other musicians. So it's a great learning experience all the way around. Plus, it's a lot of fun.
Thomas Wendt here of Duquesne University with Collegiate Tuesdays at James Street Gastropub and Speakeasy. Is this kind of culture, this culture where people build each other up musically, is that unique to jazz, do you think? Because I know in some scenes you have people working together and trying to build each other up. You see that a lot in the acoustic scene here in Pittsburgh. But in other scenes, I feel like people are overly critical and trying to put down their peers instead of work with one another and educate one another and help to build one another up. Do you think that is different among jazz versus other genres, and why is that?
I do. Yeah, I think it is a bit unique. One thing I've noticed about most jazz communities, especially here in Pittsburgh, is it's kind of like a big family. There's always some drama, as there always is in different circles of musicians. But for the most part, it's really like a big family, and people really. There's a great sense of community. I think that even though a lot of times in jazz jam sessions there can be some really good friendly competition, but in the end, it's truly about making the music as good as it can be. And that's another value that I try to really instill in my students is that, playing in a jazz group is sort of like being on a basketball team. Everybody's working towards that common goal of winning the game. And it's very important to be a team player and to be encouraging to all the other players and to work together as a team to make the music good. It's not just about you playing great. It's about making the group sound good and being a really good contributor. So I do think that that's kind of unique to jazz. Because it's such an interactive music, not just interactive between musicians, but interactive between the musicians and the audience. So, by having a chance to play as a young musician in front of a bunch of people that just got done working at the post office or, some kind of job that's a long job and can be, really arduous, those people want to feel good. They don't really care how fast you can play or how slick you can be. They need to feel something, so it teaches you as a young musician how to communicate with an audience with your music, how to get it to somebody. It's not just about the latest thing you've been practicing. It's about really communicating with music, and that's ultimately what music is all about. So it's a great chance to develop that.
It's been my observation, too, that a lot of these musicians play not only in multiple bands, but even across different genres. I know Anton DeFade was just playing with the Common Heart, for example, which is a completely different style of music than what he plays as far as elevations goes. And I wonder if that has some sort of an impact in the way that people are able to work together because they're so used to working amongst different musicians and different types of genres and things like that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, the more different musical experiences you have, you bring each one of those experiences to the next musical experience you're in. So it's kind of like, the more that the more varied experiences you have, that's always going to help whatever the next thing is you're doing. Because it's just going to give you another perspective on just music. So sure, yeah, I think most of us in the jazz world, even though like I'm primarily a jazz musician, but I've played in other kinds of groups, and that's definitely helped me. For sure.
Talk about your history, about what you've done.
Sure.
So people know who you are when they come through and they get all excited because this is going to be a good opportunity.
Sure. I'm originally from Pittsburgh. I graduated from the Performing Arts High School, Kappa. And I spent a little bit of time at Manhattan School of Music in New York, although I didn't graduate from there. And I've basically been making a living playing jazz music since I was about 18, based primarily here in Pittsburgh, although I do a fair amount of traveling with different groups. I'm a member of the Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra, and I've played with most of the older established jazz musicians here in Pittsburgh. I was the Hammond B3 organist, Gene Ludwig's drummer for better than a decade. I've worked with the great guitarist Joe Negri for a lot of years since I was in high school. I played with the late great guitarist Jimmy Ponder, David and Maureen Budway, a whole lot of different groups. I've been on faculty at the Afro-American Music Institute in Homewood since about 1998 or 99. I teach there usually 1 or 2 days a week, and recently a new adjunct at Duquesne. So it's been good so far.
Yeah, and this program, it's a way for you to reach out now. I'm excited to see this. And were you surprised when you went into Duquesne about the quality of musician that came through the school, the level of musicianship and the skill that you saw?
There's some really good students there. The cool thing about Duquesne right now is that Mike Tamero is really starting to build the jazz program much more. And there's some really talented kids there. The thing I like about Duquesne the most is that all of the students are eager to learn, and that's really the most important thing. You can always get better, you can always, improve what you do, but you have to have the right mental outlook. You have to come with a sincere humility about learning the music and respecting it, and just wanting to honestly get better, and that's what we have at Duquesne. So I'm really excited to get these students out and get them up there to play and watch them grow. That's what it's all about.
So if this continues to expand and it continues to do well at James Street, do you foresee more days added to the schedule, or do you think the once a month is going to be it?
Well, I think for now the once a month thing is going to work, but if it really takes off, we could do every other week or even every week if it really starts to fly. So yeah, we're totally open to that. I know I'm very grateful to Kevin for his support, and we're hoping that it goes well. So yeah, the sky's the limit right now.
What is the key to getting jazz in more places around Pittsburgh and more venues? Because we certainly aren't short for venues, and there certainly isn't a lacking of interest. If you go to James Street, you'll see the places packed all the time. You can go to Katz Plaza during the summer, and they have free shows there, and people stay after work, which is a hard thing to get people to do, is to stay after work, and they will, and they'll stay to see these great shows. So there's definitely an interest. There's definitely people who want jazz in the city. The city has a rich jazz history, but it's only in, as you said, a few venues.
Well, I think you're doing a great thing with this podcast and in using social media and the internet to attract some new listeners. I mean, there's a little bit of a gulf between the older folks that have loved jazz for years and the newer the younger people who are coming to the music. And technology can be a bit of a hurdle for some of the older folks, but I think that the established jazz musicians in Pittsburgh need to work a little bit harder using venues and or rather methods like yours, reaching out through the internet and social media and Twitter and things like that to just let people know what's going on. A lot of times I'll have a gig somewhere and I'll run into folks afterwards and they'll say, "Oh man, I would have been there, but I didn't know." So it's about using all these new pathways that we have for getting information out. I think that's something that will greatly help, and that's why what you're doing is really important. It's a great thing. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, it's $5 for admission, which is nothing.
And
really.
if you're a college student with a valid ID, you get in for free.
That's any college, correct?
Any college.
Any college.
Just bring your ID and no charge. There's also some drink and food specials as well. So there's some nice incentives.
Is it going to be upstairs or downstairs?
It'll be downstairs in the Speakeasy.
The Speakeasy, very cool.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful venue.
It is.
Talked about that a lot. I've always said that it kind of reminds me of the cantina from Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
With the bar that's back there, just the look of the place. But it's always been a favorite place of mine. Yeah. And I remember we would always go down to the Speakeasy. My friend introduced me to the place, and I was there on and off. And we had actually never been up to the ballroom for quite some time, and I've frequented the place now, but at the time that was kind of almost like a mystery. The ballroom.
Sure.
He had never been there. I had never been there, and it's a beautiful spot. But the Speakeasy downstairs, even though the ballroom is beautiful and holds a lot of people and everything else, the Speakeasy kind of holds a special spot for me, just because of the great musicians I've seen come through there and some of the great performances and great acts. And one thing I love about that venue is if you are a jazz fan, there is so much there. There's so much jazz, and you can almost find something every night of the weekend, from Thursday through Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's definitely just a great time and a great spot to check out.
It is, for sure, yeah.
Very cool. So I appreciate it. I know you have to run. You're on your way to class.
I am.
So I'm going to continue moving along. Don't forget, tonight, 6 p.m., Pod Crawl starts. Up next, we're going to talk about maybe the other side of teaching and a new development with one of our local school districts that is, to be quite honest, quite terrifying. So that's up next. We're going to play a song for you, and then we're going to get it back. It's going to be a weird show because we've got Pod Crawl tonight, and that's going to be very exciting. Don't miss that. It starts at Cousins Bar, 6 p.m. I'll be back just a few minutes here on the River's Edge.
Hey guys, it's Mike Sasson of The Mike Sasson Show. You got anything planned September 30th? Well, now you do. It's National Podcast Day, and me and a bunch of other podcasters are going to be all around Millvale performing our podcasts for your entertainment. I'll be at Cousins Lounge at 6 p.m. performing. Come on out, say hi, be part of the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, me, Mike Sasson, and The Mike Sasson Show will be on live at 6 p.m. at Cousins Lounge here in Millvale. Love to see you out there.
The Plum School Board this past Tuesday voted 4-3 to give school superintendent Timothy Glasspool a mulligan for turning a blind eye to sexual assault. You heard it right, a mulligan. This creep is back at the helm. How, as parents, would you deal with this? How does something like this happen? School director Michelle Stepnick has resigned in disgust. She wrote on Facebook, according to KDKA, "I will continue to advocate for our children, but the private agendas are too much. This is something I've been thinking over for some time, and tonight's meeting has put me over the edge." She's right. This is disgusting. It's sad that she's gone because she is the type of voice that they need on this council. 4-3, they voted to bring in Timothy Glasspool, the superintendent in Plum, where they've had 3 sexual assault situations, the brothel of Western Pennsylvania public schools. We've been talking about politics a lot lately on this program, and because we're in the middle of a presidential election, it's big news. And this is what makes me absolutely sick about politics. Sick! It makes me sick! Karen Aquaviva, a parent, said that this should not be permitted, that these people, these administrators, such as Glasspool, should not be permitted to work in Plum or with children whatsoever. "I have zero trust in these men, and truthfully, this board, no trust in this board, that if something happens again, that nobody will stand for our children." And unfortunately, with people like Michelle leaving, that may be true. Thank you for your service, Michelle, at least someone who's a voice and reason, but they can only put up with so much. This woman is right. Karen is right. This is beyond disgusting. According to the Tribune Review, Glasspool and other school officials began hearing reports about sexual abuse and sexual assault advances from educators to children in 2011. 2011. That's according to the Tribune Review. And with one teacher involved in a sexual assault case, Jason Cooper, he was removed from office quickly. Their friend, Joseph Ruggieri, well, they let him turn Plum High School into his own Penn State locker room. And this is according to one of the victim's lawyers. You can look it up in the Tribune Review. How does something like this happen? How do you go from Mr. Poland to Joseph Ruggieri? How do you go from Tom Wendt, a great professor, to someone like Joseph Ruggieri? There was a Japanese teacher in my school, another Japanese teacher. We went through so many Japanese teachers. We went through 4 Japanese teachers in my 4 years. I had 4 of them. Sensei Poland stayed along, but they ended up hiring a second one. And the second one that they hired, he was arrested. And you ask yourself, why was he arrested? Well, he was arrested for sexual conduct with a student. And I remember, I felt so terrible. The one teacher, she was a really wonderful lady. She was his teacher, and she was actually the teacher of the first Japanese teacher. So she's like the godmother of Japanese teachers. And she's there in class, and you know how mean and nasty kids can be. Well, one of the kids decided to let her know that the former teacher who she was replacing him because he had sex with a minor, a student at the school, and that's why they fired him. And she was devastated because that was her student. He was one of her best students. And I just remember that day, just the look of despair. Somehow she didn't know. I don't know if it was a language barrier, because she could obviously understand English, but she was from Japan. And I don't know if it was a language barrier or what, but she was just devastated. And I just remember seeing the sorrow in her eyes. It was awful. And I just don't know how you could live in Plum, how you could deal with that. And it's a situation, it's a public school, so it's difficult for somebody to just move. I pray to God that the people of Plum vote these cretins, these lowlifes, the scum, what was it, the four people? Was it 4-3? Yeah, the 4 people who voted to bring these administrators back, they need to be voted out. It's disgusting. How can you imagine living there? Can you imagine living with a school board who doesn't give a damn if your child is sexually assaulted, where there's no accountability? where the teachers can just do whatever they want if they're good friends with the principal. And yeah, we're not talking about the sheer number of victims that took place at Penn State, but from an administrative standpoint, is it really much different? If a child is at risk of sexual assault, you have to do whatever it takes to get that child out of that situation. There is just absolutely no way, absolutely no way that you can allow something like that to go on. Whatever it takes. If you have to put your own career, your own job on the line to save a child, that should be what you're doing. Instead, these clowns, these punks at Plum were dusting the situation under the rug to protect a friend. And the school board is shrugging their shoulders when it comes to the superintendent. If you live in Plum, go to the meetings. I know the last meeting was jam-packed. They had to change locations due to the sheer number of parents who came to the school board meeting. But I just don't know how you deal with that. How, as a parent, do you deal with something so terrible, so tragic? That's tragic. That's awful. The fact that you can't even feel safe in a public school because of the teachers. And the argument that you always hear all the time, and this is what drives me nuts. You hear the argument, and you hear it often, that the girls ask for it. Well, if they didn't wear such slutty clothes, well, if they didn't come on to the teacher, if they didn't put their chest out there, then the teacher would not be in a position to feel like he's turned on. Well, yeah. Ugh. You're a fucking teacher. You're the adult. Be the adult. I'm not going to make excuses for a grown-ass adult, male or female, for making sexual advances to a child. I'm not going to take that step. Have some fucking dignity and don't take that step. Don't create excuses for underage sex, for even if it wasn't underage, even if it was two consenting adults, you've got a teacher and a student. It's inappropriate, for goodness sakes. Anybody can see how unprofessional and inappropriate that is. You go to any job site, and you are not allowed to be the direct supervisor over your spouse, or even a direct family member. Why? Because of favoritism, because it's unprofessional, because it's not right. So even if they are close in age, even if they are both in college, it's just not right, it's unprofessional. Even if you're two consenting adults, you wait until you're no longer the teacher, but for Christ's sake, you don't do it to a child! That just doesn't make any sense. If you live in Plum, you need to take action. If you don't live in Plum, you can send letters, do whatever you need to do. This is such a blight on this region. It makes me physically sick to stand here, to sit here rather, and talk about this situation. How can we let something like this go on? How could 4 people on the school board decide to vote this guy back in to retain his job after everything that has gone on under his watch? Even if he was quick to he wasn't quick to respond, but even if he did everything that was right, even if he was in the right, even if, say, he was completely blindsided, he didn't know any business, when something this bad happens, the first guy to go is the guy at the top. But this guy was slow to react. They heard reports from 2011, and they didn't respond, and he needs to be fired. He needs to go. And the fact that this was even a close decision, it's just disgusting. Kudos to those... Well, I don't even want to say kudos to those who voted against him, because that's just the decent human thing to do. Shame to those who voted to keep him in. Shame to those who voted to retain him. You're right there with the Sandusky deniers. You're right there with the Joe Paw bots. I hope you enjoy the cold hell that you have created for yourself, because that is where you are going. It's amazing the wide spectrum of people that can end up in a profession. And you can really see it in education because it becomes so transparent. There's no way to escape who you are as a person, as an educator, because you spend so much time with individuals on a personal level. Eventually something will come out. And in the case of a teacher like Mr. Poland, he has changed my life very much in a positive way. And to know that he was so passionate about his craft, he taught me what true passion is, because a lot of teachers, it depends on the teacher, a lot of them, it's a job. They're punching in and they're punching out. Kind of like the first teacher I talked about, which I would love to give her name, but I don't know if that's appropriate. She was the definition of what is wrong in education today. Mr. Thomas Wendt, Professor Thomas Wendt, he is the definition of what is wonderful about teachers and how teachers can do so much good for people. And I remember as a student, when I was in college, I had a teacher, and he was a great professor. He was a Civil War professor, and he was so passionate about what he did. And he made you do essay tests. His tests were all essay, and I know that sounds like a drag. Oh, God, essays. I have to write out an essay? Who in the hell wants to do that? Well, the way he did essays was he wanted you to talk about a specific situation, a topic he would bring up in the Civil War. One topic, for example, was what brought about the modernization of the South. And he wasn't trying to be demeaning. He said, was it slavery or was it air conditioning? And the reason why he asked that was not because he didn't think that ending slavery was important. Obviously it was. Ending slavery allowed the South, or forced the South, I should say, to move beyond the plantation style that they were living in. You could still have plantations, but you would still have to modernize because you needed a workforce. So slavery had a big impact on the South, but also air conditioning allowed people to move into cities, allowed people to industrialize, because it was so hot in the South that it would not necessarily have been possible to live in such close proximity to one another and live in that city lifestyle. So it was a really fascinating discussion. But he would make you talk about these situations and describe. You would just have to do an essay, but you'd have to describe points that to back up your argument. You have to list facts. And it was just so much fun, and he was so passionate about it, and we would talk for 3 hours. It was a 3-hour class. We'd have a break because he was a smoker. We'd go outside, and we would talk about the Civil War while he was smoking. Then we'd come back in, and we would talk about the Civil War when we were done with class, and you just wanted to stay there. And he was just a really, really great guy, and that's the type of teacher that we need here right now in this country. We're going to bring Mike McMullen up next with our political update. We're going to ask him about this plum situation, since it does dive into the realm of politics. But that's up next here on The River's Edge.
Would you be interested in developing conscious choice? Would you be interested in creating reactions rather than waiting for one to come? Would you be interested in combining serendipity and synchronicity? Would you be interested in making 1 + 1 = 3? Would you be interested in finding out about full impact mindfulness? If so, I challenge you to join myself, Jim Ellermeyer, a cognitive behavioral health therapist, every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. on the River's Edge, where we will challenge you to allow us to help you help yourself to fully participate in your life. Let the adventure begin.
It's my birthday and I'll cast if I want to, cast if I want to, cast if I want to. You would cast too if you owned a 24/7 radio network. And I'll be casting tonight at 8 p.m. at the Double L Bar. I'll be followed by Bold Nights Out, preceded by the drinking partners. Mike Sasson will kick us off. You cannot miss it. It is the event that everyone is talking about. It's huge. Everyone's talking about it. The Post-Gazette's talking about it. International Podcast Day is talking about it. International exposure for tonight's event. It is the biggest event in the city of Pittsburgh tonight by far, and you are absolutely batshit insane if you don't show up. One person who, I hope he's sane. We got him on the phone. Mike McMullen, are you there?
Hey, Brian, how are you? Happy birthday to you. What, the big, 4-0 or something, I believe?
Big 4-0. Well, I look pretty damn good for 40, I would say. I am turning 30, though.
I know. Happy 30. Another year older, another year wiser.
I don't know about that, but it's fun. But 29 was a good year, so I'm hoping that 30 will continue the ball rolling, and we can continue to have great success here at the River's Edge in my 30th year.
Absolutely. Well, it's a little sidebar. Finally, I got to give a little plug, and thank you for having Jordan York on and myself representing the Resende twins. But we finally released it on Wednesday night, and we did our press release yesterday and today, so it's viral, and we're already getting a lot of exposure and all that, and requests for media appearances. So it's
fantastic.
Good.
Wonderful. Good job. I know you were integral in getting that together, so congratulations.
Well, thank you. Well, in the world of politics, after the debate on Monday night,
who won?
Well, like anything, opinions are everybody has an opinion. Honestly, I thought to answer the question who won, I thought it was a draw. I'll be honest with you. Everybody had moments of brilliance, moments of suckiness. She was more prepared. I'm not going to, obviously I'm a Trump supporter and a Trump guy, but she was more prepared. She knew her talking points and so forth. The one thing with Trump, yes, he is the outsider. He doesn't like to do canned policy speeches or policy long speeches, but he acted like he was talking to a rally and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Well, when it's a one-on-one debate with your opponent, not a primary opponent, your general election opponent, and the moderator asks the questions, this isn't a 30-second rah-rah speech, to fire up the base or anything. You got to ask the questions. Look, they both had good one-liners, a couple of them on both sides, but they didn't talk about Benghazi. They didn't talk about the emails. I think the line that I love with Trump, it's well, I'll release my tax returns against my lawyer's judgment when you release the 33,000 emails.
That was a good line.
That was a good line. But look, there's two more debates, but ultimately, are people going to be swayed by the debates? The next debate is in Virginia, and the next one's out in Colorado. The vice presidential debates, I think, 2 weeks before the general election. Look, we don't vote for a VP. People aren't going to vote for Tim Kaine or Mike Pence. They're both good gentlemen, but, at the end of the day, they're not going to vote for president to determine that. Trump has to go for the kill, meaning, game, set, match, the knockout punch in the next debate. I thought he would have done it this time, but look, it's like I said, it's down to 7 to 10 states. He's closing the gap in Pennsylvania. Like I said, I'm not being negative. We've not won Pennsylvania since '88. Now it's down to 3 or 4, but we shall see moving forward.
Mike, I said earlier this week on Wednesday in regards to the debate, and I want to get your thoughts. First off, I agree. I do think it was a draw. I think they both made great points, but I thought Donald Trump missed an opportunity to completely knock Clinton out. I think he could have had a checkmate. Whenever they brought up the Debbie Wasserman Schultz situation in the DNC rigging the election, that came up, and all Donald had to say was, you shouldn't even be on this stage if you didn't steal the election from Bernie Sanders.
Well, the thing is, Brian, it's a very good point. Look, he should have capitalized on it. There are moments in debates, there's moments in media where you've got to know your audience, you've got to know your surroundings, and when a question or a series of questions is posed of that nature, you've got to go for the jugular, stick the knife in, and go for the kill, and just knock out punch. And he didn't do it.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I thought that was the perfect opportunity, and if there was ever a candidate to do it, it was him. And that's one thing I will give him credit for, Mike, in this debate. He wasn't Romney. He didn't pussy out of of fighting back or saying anything. I mean, we've had so many candidates who are just so afraid to say a disparaging word to the Democratic candidate, and we finally at least had a candidate on the Republican side. I mean, the Democrats have done a great job of trashing Republicans, but the Republicans have never, ever stood up for themselves. They never fought back. They just laid down, died, allow people to walk all over them, and finally we do have a candidate on the Republican side who is unwilling to allow that to happen.
Well, Brian, this candidate has got a set of kahunas. I mean, so, and I give him credit for that. But I think ultimately at the next debate, and look, they're going to go back and forth for the next, next couple of weeks or whatever, next 2 weeks before the next debate, and they're going to be pissing and moaning and firing shots across the bow both ends. But ultimately, we'll see. And then, like I said, it's down to 7-10 states. And this is nowhere to go north, south, east, west. It's going New Hampshire, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, Iowa, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico. Those 7 to 10 states are ultimately going to determine the election. Yes, I didn't mention Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, but historically those have been leaning or on the Democratic column. We'll have to see and then move forward.
How many Aleppo moments does Gary Johnson need to have before he becomes a non-factor?
Well, the thing is, Weld and the Gary Johnson, William Weld ticket, they're going to draw from both sides of the aisle because people aren't happy that Hillary's the nominee and vice versa with Trump because they wanted Cruz or Rubio or Bernie or they wanted Bernie or somebody else. Look, I mean, and like I've said before, ultimately, strong third-party candidates strong third-party candidates like a Gary Johnson could spoil it for him. I mean, there's two schools of thought to that. But the thing is, if Gary Johnson polls well, like let's say in New Mexico, he's a former 2-term governor there. Let's say he gets 7 to 10%. That ultimately could hurt Trump. But also it could hurt Hillary. I mean, it's depending. Each state, each city, each region, you just can't say ultimately, is Johnson done? Well, if he polls at 6 to 8% or 6 to 10% nationally, let's look back in history a little bit. You look at, the billionaire Texan, Ross Perot in 92, 96, he got about 17, 18% in 92 and about probably 14, 15% in 96, and ultimately hurt Bush Sr. and he hurt Bob Dole. Now, granted, I don't think anybody was going to beat, bumbling Bill Clinton anyway at the time, but, Ross Perot almost got 20% of the vote, 14 to 20%, that's pretty significant. So, I mean, it's going to be a telltale sign what Gary Johnson does. Jill Stein, I don't think is a non-factor. I think she's barely polling at 1 or 2%.
Yeah, but she's the most fun candidate. I want her to do better. I want her in the debates.
Well, honestly, I'd like to see all 4 of them in a debate. But the thing is, like anything, the Presidential Commission has criteria. You've got to be polling at a certain polling number or whatever to get to that magic number.
I'd like to see her get on stage. I'd like to see like the Secret Service come in and have to arrest her on stage and pull her off.
Well, yeah, because if I recall, if I'm wrong, I stand corrected. Didn't she or one of her supporters, or she ripped down a sign or something out in Wyoming or North Dakota or destruction of property? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, she was vandalizing equipment out near the where they were trying to drill the pipeline in Native American territory, which I actually like. And that actually made me kind of dig her in a way. I'm thinking at least she believes what she says. How rare is that?
Well,
she's willing to put herself in jail for her convictions, which is more than we could say about some of our candidates.
We don't even have enough for a whole segment to finish out the hour.
Mike, I want to talk a little bit about the local level here. Have you heard about the recent Plum school board meeting?
Which one?
Okay, they voted 4-3 to give Superintendent Timothy Glasspool, the wizard who hid sexual child abuse in the school district. They decided to vote 4-3 to give him his job back. He gets a mulligan for turning a blind eye to sexual assault.
Well, Brian, and I'm being the Pitt alum that I am, and And yes, I did read about that. And that I think was in the last week or in the last 10 days or so. Look, everybody is innocent until a crime is proven. But here again, and I'm going to go into, and I don't want to piss off all my Penn State friends and alumni and your listeners, but here's the thing. What is worse? I mean, and I'll use the Penn State situation. What is worse, the crime itself or the cover up the crime? I think it's equally both. And why do you ultimately think that Graham Spainer, the president of Penn State University, who's still on a taxpayer-funded salary, we're paying it, in addition to Spainer, Curley, and one of the other top administrators, why do you think they were ultimately forced out, fired, resigned, or whatever because of the cover-up? And the same thing is locally in the Plum School District. And I mean, shame on those school board members.
Which is worse, Mike, the cover-up or the people who gave him his job back?
Both. They're both. I mean, I'll tell you what. If I were a resident of Plum Borough, I would be incensed and outraged. And elections have consequences. And ultimately, whoever those 4 school board members were to vote in favor of, I would vote their asses out. I mean,
I don't know what consequences are severe enough. I mean, this is so beyond politics, Mike. This is just awful. Awful.
And like I said, what I understand that the investigations aren't done yet. There still could be more people charged. Because like I said, I mean, it just wasn't one isolated thing. I mean, what they had 3 or 4 teachers out at Plum, and believe me, Plum is a very good district in the eastern suburbs of Pittsburgh.
I wouldn't take my kids there.
Well, honestly, I will say this is that parents know best for their kids. I'm not going to put a blanket statement, whether it be parochial school, private.
But what are they supposed to do if they're poor, if they don't have the money to do that? I mean, that's an awful situation to have it happen in a public school like that where you have no options.
Well, and Brian, I agree, and we could discuss school choice at another venue or time.
This is definitely the right the proof is in the pudding here, Mike. This is where we need school choice. The fact that these people are victimized, these parents and these kids, where they're forced to be in this school district that is practically a southwestern Pennsylvania youth brothel. I mean, it's awful. They've had 3 situations where people or one who's under investigation, 2 have been proven guilty.
Correct.
And it's all been within, what was it, like a year that it all happened?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. When they first started, it's been a couple years.
Well, 2011 is when they first heard about it, but they sat on their hands because it was their buddy.
Yep. Well, and I just saw this week in the last 72 hours that one of the kids filed a federal lawsuit in federal court, I think, against the teacher of the district, and I think they named everybody in the lawsuit. So, it's not over. I mean, it is a travesty what happened. But getting back to your premise of the original question, if I were a taxpayer in Plum, I'd be incensed and outraged, and I'd be pissed off and vote those bastards out.
I'm not advocating violence, but if I lived there, I'd be in jail myself if I was a parent of one of those students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, there's no words that I can come up with to just describe how tragic, how awful, how gut-wrenchingly disgusting that story is. And who in the hell would think that's okay? I mean, you gotta be like really messed up in the head to vote that guy to get his job back, to vote for that guy.
And like I said, Brian, I'm not passing judgment. I mean,
I am.
I don't know. Well, no. I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't want to, convict somebody on air, on radio, or I mean, like I said, I don't know all the facts on both sides of the issue, and and I don't know if that was a public vote, or if that was a private vote. I mean, I'm sure
it was public. I mean, those have to be. Yeah, that has to be public.
Okay.
The only thing that you could vote on, I mean, if it was a personnel issue, if they were describing the actual case, that would go to an executive session, which would be removed
correct.
from the audience. But to actually vote on the hiring and the firing of employees, that is done in the public forum.
The public. And like I said, good point and well aware of that. But I didn't know if this was a special case because of the sensitivity and all that. But I mean, and here again, I mean, people fail to realize, and teachers, all district employees, think they're above reproach. Well, just remember who pays your salary. the taxpayers in each various district. We, the taxpayers, pay your salary.
In a lot of cases, though, they are above the law. I mean, we've been talking about that all day on this show. It's a situation where, you know, education, you have some of the best people you could ever find in the world working in education, and then you have some real scumbags.
I agree. Well, and Brian, like in any industry, you know, at any job, you have good, bad, and different. You have a lot of scum in the earth, you know, but I, you know, like in any industry, any profession, there's always one or two or, you know, a bushel of bad apples or several. And you know, and I'm a firm believer in karma, and, you know, what comes around goes around.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. I look forward to talking with you next week.
Thanks, Brian. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
It's Mike McMullen here on the River's Edge. We have a holiday to celebrate. We're going to give you 2 holidays today. You get 2 holidays for the price of 1 if you stop by at 8 p.m. at the Double L to see Ian Insect try to go one-on-one with me. Whoever Ian Insect is, that's going to go on 8 p.m. tonight at the Double L. But we get your holiday right now. So today is officially the Hug a Vegetarian Day. Hug a Vegetarian Day. Why would you hug a vegetarian? Because they can't eat meat. And you gotta feel bad for them for that. How tragic is that? Can't eat meat. Whew. I know, I'm a carnivore myself, so to me, that is pretty distressing. All right, well, that's it for me for now. I will be back tonight for the pod crawl. Do not forget, it starts at 6 p.m. with Mike Sasson at Cousins Bar, Cousins Lounge. That's going to be it's a beautiful venue there. They have the best ceiling in Millvale. It is breathtaking. So we're going to be there. We're going to be at Grist House afterwards. Cousins Grist House, Double L with me and Bold Nights Out. Then over to Smokies for Awesome Cast. And we're going to wrap it up with your Jag Off at Sidelights Bar and Grill. Ian Insect, he's bringing the Swive, and they're going to sit their ass down because they are up against Pittsburgh's Moral Compass, the king of the Allegheny, master of the Millvale Shore, tonight at 8 p.m. at the Double L. I'll see you there. Do not miss it.